Welcome back to Women's Wealth, The Middle Way, the show that answers your questions about work, money, and family. My name is Susan McGlory Michael, and I am the CEO and founder of Glen Eagle, a wealth management firm in New Jersey. Our guest today is Amy Daughters, our award-winning author and keynote speaker. Amy is passionate about restoring the human touch we've lost in our tech-focused world. She believes that it can be done through the forgotten art of writing letters by hand. Wow, I can't wait to talk about this. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you very much, Susan. I'm excited about being on.
Well, Amy, can you just share a little bit about your background and who you are, Amy?
I grew up in Houston, Texas, and I got a business degree, and I was in the purchasing field for about 15 years when my husband's job asked us if we wanted to go to the UK for 3 years. We had one small child. We went over and I realized, oh my goodness, Susan, what am I going to do? Because I worked all the time. I didn't have a work visa. And I'd always written on the side and kind of read my emails at work and either thought it was profound or hilarious and would reread the passion. So almost out of desperation, I started to write and I realized I could sell my writing. So I started to freelance. And by the time we got back to the United States, I had another kid and a side gig. And so I turned that, as I was getting the second kid off to school, I turned it into a full-time career and wrote a first book. And then the second book is what I speak about. And that's when I was just minding my own business when I got into letter writing.
And I have to agree with you. So many times in life, especially as women and moms and working moms, we have aha moments, but I also wonder in my life how many times I didn't pause enough to really think about those aha moments that could be life changing. And it sounds like you had one of those where you were put in a situation where you said, okay, what am I going to do? And then you began to become creative. And that leads me in to sort of what inspired you to kind of handwrite letters to all your Facebook friends. And what insights did you gain when you did this? I was intrigued when I read that.
It's a story that happened so non-intentionally, and it makes it even more magical the way it happened. Like I said, I'd written the first book. I was freelancing. I was basically minding my own business. I got on Facebook one day, like a lot of us do, and I had a friend I had met at a summer camp 30 years earlier. I had not spoken one word to her. We had no contact in person, electronically in 30 years. But her name had always kind of bounced around in my head. So one day I sit down, Facebook's up. I type in her name, Dana. Oh, there she is. She lives in Louisiana. She's overdid it with the kids. She has 5 children. Like she overachieved. She didn't overdo it. And right away, I do what we all did. I went and looked at her page and caught up on her life. I friended her. And since it didn't really mean anything, it was social media, she accepted my friendship request. And so I did that little review. And right away, I realized, Susan, that she had 4 daughters. They were the older kids, 1 son. He was the only son and the youngest. His name was Parker. And he was at St. Jude in Memphis fighting cancer. I knew it must be serious, but as a mom, as a woman, as a human being, I was like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. And so I started following along the story. And I could kind of feel like I was overfeeling it just a little bit, but I just followed along with the story. I didn't like anything. I didn't comment on anything. I just watched. And I was very concerned. I felt myself, like I said, getting kind of into the story. Well, his name was Parker. Parker eventually went back home to Louisiana. He went into remission. So they went on the back burner of my consciousness. And then the next year, you could tell something was changing. And Dana posted, she's very honest and open. And she said that he had relapsed. They were going back to Memphis, Tennessee. And I sat back after reading that post, and it was literally like a lightning bolt came out of the sky and hit me on the head. And I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start writing them letters. And this, despite the fact that I still had not any contact with Dana in 30 years. I'd never met Parker, and I had written one person a letter in 25 years probably. So I didn't come into this thing like as some letter writing warrior who was going to go change the world. I was just a normal girl trying to stay married and not mess up my kids. And so I start to write Dana and Parker at the Ronald McDonald House in Memphis. And I write them for about 8 weeks. I knew it was kind of crazy, but I was just like, we're supporting you. We're praying for you. We're thinking of you. Just know you have our support. And again, I just felt more involved in the story than I should have. Well, about 8 to 10 weeks after that, tragically, and there's no good words for this, and it has nothing to do with me, but Parker passes away at only 15.
Every mother listening to this just their heart pauses.
That's me, Susan. I was another mother among everyone who's listening, just deflated. And I had followed along with the story. I didn't know him, but I sat back and I was like, what am I supposed to do? I knew it had nothing to do with me. I knew that was a little illogical, but it was just another little bolt of lightning. It was like gut instinct. Like, I know what I'm going to do. Like, I'm not just going to talk. I'm going to keep writing this girl letters. So now, and think about it, this is your Facebook friend. You got to find out where this person actually lives. I knew she lived in Louisiana. I did not know what town. So I do a little light stalking. These are different levels of crazy, and I understand that. And I find her husband.
I love your transparency. You are amazing.
So I found her husband's office address, and like again, illogically, I start sending her letters there every week. And I have a writing schedule because I was writing about football at the time, and so I just put her on my schedule, and I'd write her a letter, and I'd mail it every single week. And so this went on for 4 or 5 months, and yes, the whole time I'm going, what are you doing? You are nutso. She lost her son and you're writing her letter. She doesn't even know who you are. But I just felt so compelled. I was so driven to do this. I was almost like I'd lost control of myself. And so 4 or 5 months into it, I go out to my mailbox. It's my birthday. I'm hopeful that like somebody's going to send me something, but nobody sends you anything on your birthday now. And I open the mailbox. Susan, there is a 10-page letter from Dana in Louisiana. This kicks off 2 years of me and this random girl writing each other letters. We developed this unbelievable trust because I don't even know if she's reading half of what I'm saying. She doesn't know that I'm reading what she's saying. We don't know when we're reading anything. And it gave us this vacuum in which to share with. We probably figured the other person was listening, but we developed this trust that made no sense. And the most beautiful thing was I had not one clue what she believed in terms of politics or religion or all those things that separate us. I had not one clue about any of that. And she shared about her grief. I was looking at my life from the outside in. The letters started off 1 page, a card. All of a sudden it's 17-page letters. We would Xerox pictures of house things we were doing and share that with each other. So I'm like 8 months into this thing. And it changed the way I looked at grief because she shared so profoundly. I sat back and I was like, man, if this can happen with this one random girl, what other untapped goodness is out there on this list of these random people that I barely know? So then I went completely like over the top crazy. I got an Excel spreadsheet. I put everyone's names, all 580 of my Facebook friends. I cut them all out. I shoved them into a box. I bought stationery and I sat down and I journaled the whole thing. And I pulled the name out, and that started 18 months of writing every single one of those people a handwritten letter, and it blew up my life.
Having talked to so many people that have gone through grief, you probably have no comprehension of what a gift you gave Dana. And then from that, I can't help but believe that the power of these handwritten letters and just creating meaningful connections. Tell us a little bit about that. So now you've pulled these names out. You're writing handwritten letters to each Facebook friend, that some people don't even know who their Facebook friends are. Tell us a little bit about the creative meaningfulness of these connections that you started.
I didn't understand how meaningful this was going to be. And the first part of the meaningful is what the letter said. And it's not that I sat down intending to say something nice, but let's say I was writing you a letter and you and I, Susan, had gone to high school together. Well, the first thing I'm going to do, because what am I going to say to you? I'm going to go to your profile and I'm going to look at it. In the act of individually looking at each of these people who had had something to do in my life, whether it was for 10 minutes or 10 years, I found out all this stuff I didn't know about people. So in your case, I'd look at your profile and be like, oh my gosh, she's running this wealth management company that she founded in 2002. She's an advocate for women in business. She runs this podcast on the side to give back. So the first thing I would have said was, oh my God, Susan, I'm so proud to be your friend. I'm so proud of what you've done with your life. You've had children. I would say something about that. I'd look at your pictures. And then the second most natural thing I do, I'd be like, Susan, wait a second. Susan was the one who stood next to me at the payphone when the guy broke up with me. And Susan got right in my face and she's like, look, Amy, you're not going to let this define your life. You're going to have better relationships. This is not going to be how your relationship thing is going to end. I'd be like, hey, Susan, you may have forgotten that completely, but I've never forgotten that as long as I live. So thank you. And so you combine that. So let's say you would thank people, you would apologize to people, you would offer support, you would offer condolences for losses, and a lot of the stuff you didn't know about, not because you were a bad person, but none of us sit down and individually consider all these people. It's just not what we do. And this letter thing forced me to do it. So then What took it to the next level, and I did not understand this in 2018, if you go to the mailbox and you pull out a letter from me, it creates this magical moment that I didn't understand, because you're going to pull it out, and much less when you read it and it's meaningful, but you're going to understand when you see that envelope. You're going to be like, Amy sat down and she took time to write all this stuff down. Then she had to find an envelope. Then she had to find my address. And wait a second, who even has a stamp anymore? Then she had to get in her car and find the blue mailbox or go to the post office. And you're going to hold that thing in your hand, Susan. You're going to be like, I matter to another person in this world. And so over and over and over again, people were like, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. It blew my mind.
Wow. It's almost like the gift of unconditional love and caring without asking for anything in return, which is, I think, the beauty of this.
It is unconditional connection, because what I found out over and over again is if you and I had this connection from high school or college or junior high school or summer camp or whatever work, that's a perfect example. If you write to me and then I write you back, something so intentional, so non-intrusive, so, like you said, it doesn't have any strings attached to it. All of a sudden, all that stuff that separates us. You voted this way, I voted that way. You believe this about gender equality, I believe this. You practice this religion, I don't practice religion. It still matters to us individually, but it matters a lot less. It starts to dissipate, and there's so much hope in that. And that's why I'm so passionate about talking about it. And it's so applicable. You're a business person. You do a podcast that's more business orientated. It's a tool we can use relationally on every level of our lives.
And you know, the beauty of it is with the current world, and for every generation it's existed, you're right, there's such a divide. But this, to me, if I'm listening, and the women that are listening to this podcast today, you know, we always, after people share what they do, we always love to sum it up by saying they're driving down the road and they're thinking, why haven't I written that thank you note? Or, gosh, you know what, I have an aunt, or I have a child at college. What would it mean if they got that letter from me telling them really from my heart how I feel, or just sincerely asking them, what advice, Amy, would you give someone who's listening to you today and saying, that's amazing, but I'm not sure I can do that? How do they start handwriting letters in this digital age and almost creating a sense of peace and calmness within their world that they give themselves, this lost, I think, art and gift?
First of all, I think the problem with my story is that it's overwhelming. It's like 600 letters and handwritten in 2 pages. I think anyone who's listening who feels like they want to write a letter card, a lot of people I've talked to, they have somebody in their head when I'm telling this whole story that they want to reconnect with or say something to, kind of what you just said. I would say you got to do it your way. Like go buy a small note card, and you can have the same amount of meaning in 3 sentences. Or you might need somebody who has 6 pages they need to do. But you got to do it and make it your own. My story needs to be thrown out the window except for the inspiration of how I learned over and over and over again that we really can make a difference for people by handwriting notes or letters. And do it your own way. And if you don't need to do 580, if your goal is 1 in the next 6 months, that's incredible and that's amazing. There's no way you could mess this up. And I think as women, we get in our own head about a lot of stuff. I know I did as a writer, because I don't have a writing degree. I got in my own head about I can't really be a writer. You just need to sit down and put what's in your heart on a piece of paper. And I would encourage you, if it's 4 sentences, stick it in an envelope, put a stamp on it, drop it, and see what happens. And do it at your own speed. That's 100% the right way to do it.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, this has been actually inspirational, and I think you're right. I think each one of us is thinking of those few people that we think about all the time, we wonder about all the time, but do we really pause and take the time to actually show that love for them or that care by that one simple, it doesn't even have to be, you're right, you don't have to be a professional writer, to just put in writing your feelings, not even long. This has been empowering for me. I can't thank you enough for joining us today, because I don't know about anybody else, but I think by the end of the weekend I'm going to have written a couple of notes. So thank you. What a gift. What a gift.
That's tremendous. And thank you so much for letting me share our story.
Well, thank you. And Amy, we will make sure that we read your book, because Dear Dana, and you cannot mess this up. I think I am motivated now to read, because you are an inspiration, I think, to so many of us. And you took something that's so simple and yet so powerful in life. And thank you for sharing. Thanks for tuning into today's episode of Women's Wealth, The Middle Way. Make sure to subscribe to us and leave a review on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, or your favorite podcast app. Join us for new episodes every other Wednesday. See you in 2 weeks.